back to day 2 of our conversation about sanctity of life. I'm Cheri, and I'm with Greg and Lyndon from Life Plan. And today we're just going to jump right in and tackle the issue of abortion and the church. So let's start off with talking about, why are people afraid to bring up abortion in the church? Greg, you're a pastor. Give us your insight into that.
Yeah, I'll tell you, I've experienced this firsthand. At times, the fear and trepidation that I feel, even though I have a belief that all life matters and that we need to speak out. I'll tell you, one thing I've struggled with is the idea that it's so easy to offend people. Mm-hmm. Our culture is just so offendable. And it's like everything you say can be twisted, and then you have social media. You just say something on Facebook, and it doesn't take very long, and people just extrapolate all types of things that may or may not be true. So I think there's a lot of just genuine fear that talking about it could just create all kinds of controversy. I also think and I'm going to throw it over to Lyndon here, that the idea of shame, if you're watching this, and the statistics are out there, that there are people in every church, most likely, that have had an abortion, and some people then have had more than one. If you are one of those people, first of all, we want to say that God wants you to be free. He wants you to get healing. But what happens, and we understand this, is that shame silences our voice. We don't want to bring this up because we know that will involve additional pain on top of other pain. So I think those two things kind of rise to the surface. The idea that we're afraid to talk about it because we might offend, and then the idea of just the people that it affects. There's so much shame attached to it that just drives us to silence. But what would you say?
Thanks, Greg. I've talked with some pastors, and they've mentioned to me, Lyndon, I have so many things on my plate already, and I have a very small church, or a medium-sized. I have so many things on my plate already. You bring up this topic, and all of a sudden the floodgates of issues come up, and I don't know if we're ready for that. So they're afraid about that. They're afraid sometimes, depending on where your area is, you're perceived as a right-wing conservative, you're radical people. and so there's a lot of issues behind these politically charged topics like this. So we do understand. Those are the things I hear, Greg.
Yeah, again, there's an image that comes to mind, when you think about these pro-life rallies, but also pro-choice rallies, right. And it's like they usually the pictures that you see are the most extreme examples, and that can really just turn your heart, because you're like, wow, I don't want to line myself up with that. So it's like, we can't talk about this, but I'll tell you, we do need to talk about that. Yes. But we wanted to shift gears. I think, Cheri, we're going to talk about maybe some practical things that we can do, and we can all weigh in on this. So
absolutely. So it is, it's very important to still have that conversation, to still be willing to talk about abortion in the church, even though there might be some fear. You mentioned floodgates opening up, and all the stuff that they feel unequipped or unqualified. Well, really, who of us is qualified?
Right.
Yeah.
God is the one that qualifies.
Right.
So if you start talking about it, God is going to qualify you.
Right.
He's going to bring people to you that you can help through this. But you've got to have that conversation. You've got to start. So go ahead.
I think this is a very important topic for pastors and leaders and families to talk about. And the reason is, God's people, since the beginning of time, who's been called to justice. Mm-hmm. Micah 6:8, we're called to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. The power of the resurrection is upon us. In fact, in the church of Ephesus, in the olden days, in the church of Ephesus, there used to be a garbage dump. And in that days, infanticide, people used to leave their babies there that they didn't want. And guess what? The Christians picked them up. And do you know why the Christians picked up those babies and adopted them? You know why? Because they believed in the resurrection. And that same resurrection has transformed our heart. We are called to live out justice, to call it out, not in an inappropriate way, but in a gracious and godly way like Jesus did it. So this is what God's people are to do. Whatever that means in your context, in your situation, we need to speak out. And this is the injustice that's happening in our world, and we need to point the light of the gospel on it.
Absolutely.
You know, one of the thoughts I had, about practical suggestions, and this happened a number of years ago when my daughter was quite young. The first time she went to baby cakes. First time she went to baby cakes during our cupcake contest that we just had last weekend. A number of years ago, she obviously most kids like cupcakes. And while we were eating the cupcakes and just enjoying, this sugar fest we were having, my wife and I began to talk to her a little bit about what this was really about. We used the baby cake fundraiser as an opportunity to talk to our daughter about what Life Plan was really about. And so I think every opportunity we have to say, okay, this is who we are, but this is why we believe this. We believe that all life matters. And what Life Plan is about redeeming life, helping bring life into the world, but then walking along with people so that they can live the most hope-filled life that they possibly can be. So there's just a practical example, if you've got younger kids, to use an example like that to maybe help.
That's great. And as far as other examples and ideas for in the church, starting the conversation in the church is to bring in Life Plan. If you don't feel like you can have that or preach that sermon or do that yourself, or even if you do feel like you can and just want to bring us in, we go to churches. Lyndon has a sermon that he preaches. He can preach it in your pulpit about sanctity of life. You can have us come and speak to your women's group, to your Sunday school classes, other small groups, youth group, men's group, okay? All of those things, bring us in. We'd love to help you start the conversation there. And then also just help your church get involved through volunteering. You can do that through coming to our events that we have, or even through coming and doing individual weekly volunteers, all of that. But just have that conversation and start that conversation. It is an issue that's about justice. And we need to be the ones promoting that justice and seeking justice. What is it? Seek justice, love mercy. Walk humbly with your God. I know songs. Can't say that. Anyway, Greg's going to bring us on out with a scripture today.
Yeah. Now there are a lot of great scriptures that we could utilize when it comes to talking about this issue and having boldness. One is found in Ephesians 4, where it talks about speaking the truth in love. And I think what we've seen, and a lot of times we are afraid, is we've seen the truth with very little love or no love at all. And at Life Plan, we want to marry those two terms together. We want to speak the truth, but we want to do it in the most grace-filled, most loving, most kind way that we can. So I wanted to share actually from Romans chapter 12. And I've been reading through Romans right now devotionally. So of course, I'm just really caught up in the Apostle Paul and his words. But I love what he had to say toward the very end of Romans 12, because I think it really plays into this idea of why we need to get involved and why we need to speak up. But it says this, it says, love must be sincere, hate what is evil, cling to what is good, be devoted to one another in brotherly love, honor one another above yourselves, never be lacking in zeal, but keep your spiritual fervor serving the Lord. Be joyful in hope, patient in affliction, faithful in prayer, share with God's people who are in need, practice hospitality, bless those who persecute you, and bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice, mourn with those who mourn. See a lot of practicality there with those of us that have actually been through an abortion or know someone who has. But then it says, live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud, but be willing to associate with people of low position. Do not be conceited. I know, he just keeps going, so hang in there. Do not repay anyone evil for evil. Be careful to do what is right in the eyes of everybody. If it is possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. There's that tension again we feel when we talk about this. But I think there are ways to talk about it where we can do it with such love and such grace that people will actually be open to it and receive it. It goes on to say, do not take revenge, my friends, but leave room for God's wrath. For it is written, it is mine to avenge. I will repay, says the Lord. On the contrary. Now, it ends the whole thing with this verse. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good. And the thought that I want to bring to your heart today is one of the greatest good things that you can do is to speak out, is to have courage. Do it not from a self-righteous type position. Do it with the grace of God, knowing that we need to bring this up and we need to bring it out, and we've got to be courageous. So we want to thank you for joining us today again. Hey, catch us tomorrow. We've got another video that we want to share with you.